So we are finally in week 2. I know week 1 is always stressful for everyone trying to figure out where things are located in eLearn. Remember, if you're having trouble, always stop by or give me a call. Your assignments should be found under content, and then those assignments will need to be put in the Dropbox under the appropriate labeled Dropbox file. This week we're going to look at Chapter 1, Getting Started in the Commercial Greenhouse Business. And what you'll find is a lot of people think that they want to be in the greenhouse business until they stop and think about it in a little more detail. So the purpose of this week is going to be to give you a little heads up in case you're thinking about going into the greenhouse business. What are some things that you need to consider before you actually do it? Kind of in way of reminder or just for information, for this week you need to view the Chapter 1 presentation. Then you need to take the time to read the chapter in the book. I can't explain everything to you in these little short videos. It would take hours and hours for me to do that. But some topics or some tips for you would be to look at the topic heading before you actually read the chapter. Write down any questions you would like to answer. As you read, make notes in the margin. This will help you go back and look at points that you found interesting. You may want to underline or highlight important concepts. That way when you're studying for a test, you have those things identified. Carry on an active dialogue with the author, and what that means is if the author asks a question, actually write down the answer. Or if you have a question that you would like to ask the author if they were sitting here, write that down in the margin as well. And then if you keep a reading journal, comment on that, or if you want to put that in your lab report, that'll be fine. And so then what you do with those questions that you outline is if you want to post those to our discussion board labeled questions, you can, or if you want to send me an email, just something for you to kind of get a better understanding of the chapter. As you read, you want to complete the Chapter 1 handout. You can find that under content and turn it into the Dropbox labeled Chapter 1 handout. Then there's a Chapter 1 quiz. This is an open note quiz, so you can turn this into the Dropbox labeled Chapter 1 quiz. Again, you can use your textbook, you can use whatever resources you want, but make sure you get that turned in by midnight on Sunday. So with that, let's jump right into the chapter. So before opening a greenhouse business, a good thing for you to ask yourself is, why did I decide that I want to go into the greenhouse business? If it's just because you enjoy plants or you like to work in landscaping, it might be better for you just to buy plants maybe weekly, look for clearance plants, and have those as hobby plants in your house. If you were thinking, well, I really enjoy working with plants in my yard, that's kind of like saying, I enjoy taking a Sunday drive with being a truck driver. You need to think about the commitment that's going to go into buying a greenhouse and starting a greenhouse business. You need to know up front that if you are going to be in the greenhouse business, you're going to work long hours. You are going to be the manager, so you're going to have to make lots of management decisions. You're going to have to obey lots of regulations and rules that are set forth by the local government in your area. You're going to have to understand how plants grow, and you're going to have to be prepared to bounce back after disasters, because heaters go out in greenhouse or plastic rips or whatever the case may be. And it's really a tough business to be in, and I know that's probably not the most enticing thing you've ever heard, but in reality that's the truth. But there are some advantages to owning your own greenhouse. One is that you do get to be your own boss, and then secondly is it can be rewarding when you start from seed and at the end of the growing season you see this whole crop of plants and you get to sell those and watch the enjoyment of people. If that's something that you're interested in, maybe this is for you. Somewhere I read about greenhouse business that disaster will happen if you are not prepared, and sometimes if you are. And in the case in the greenhouse here at Walters State, I found that to be the case. We've had a heater go out in the middle of the winter when we had a full tomato crop. We've had hailstorms rip the plastic. We've just had lots of different things happen, and you have to be prepared to respond to those. You also need to be aware that there are a few greenhouse growers who are making six figures but for the most part, greenhouse growers report an income of between $25,000 and $40,000 for their per year as their income. So, it's a comfortable living, but you're probably not going to make it rich just because you have a greenhouse. The second question is to ask yourself, what types of crops do you want to produce? You need to be careful that you grow what sells, not what you are fond of. Pet plants or plants that the greenhouse grower just keeps around because they like them is one way to kill your greenhouse business. They harbor diseases and insects, not to mention they're kind of expensive to keep around because you have to continuously fertilize them and you have to continue to water them and keep heat on them. So you need to look at what people will buy, not what you particularly like. Then the third question, you have to decide who you will sell to, for how much, and how you'll do that. So as far as the type of business, will you be selling wholesale or will you be a retail provider? Have you done some research on the market in your area? Is there a market for plants, or is the market already bombarded with other greenhouses and nurseries? If you're going to ship, how will you do shipping, or will you deliver if you're a wholesaler? And then pricing. You have to look at your pricing scheme, and these are all things that we'll talk about a little more as we go through the semester. The fourth question here is, what experience do you have growing plants? This is really important to think about, because if you've never worked in a greenhouse or you don't have a lot of experience, you've just kind of piddled with your own plants, then you may need a little extra training. One way to get that is to work in someone else's business for a few years. Let them cover the cost of mistakes, and I know that sounds mean, but it's just the truth. Or if you wanted to, you can work through the Walter State Greenhouse program here, and there are some other programs. Or you may be able to do some kind of business partnership with someone who has worked with plants before and gain some knowledge from them. That way that you don't go into debt and lose your business because of inexperience or a lack of knowledge. Greenhouse growers have to look carefully at their financial situation. Some reports have said that it takes 2 to 3 years for a greenhouse business to turn a profit. This could take more time or less time. You can think about the area that you live in and how well your greenhouse business would go over. But if it's going to take a couple years before you actually turn a profit, you may need to make sure that you have some backup plan, or you will need to make sure that you have some backup plan in place to cover for those 2 years until you can get yourself established. The sixth question to ask is how you'll set up your business. You could be a sole proprietor and be the manager, but then you'll also assume all the liabilities. You might be able to work with a partner, and then you would split the liabilities, which means you would also split the profits. There's something called a limited partnership, where one partner is limited in what they put into the partnership, or both partners are limited, and that provides a little more protection against your personal assets in case the business doesn't make it. And then finally, there are corporations. Very few greenhouses are actually corporated. Most of the time you'll see that a greenhouse is a partnership or a sole proprietorship. Then as part of the seventh question, and you'll see here on the screen, failing to plan is planning to fail, and I'm sure that we've all heard that before. But if you don't have an adequate business plan in place, you really are planning to fail, because with greenhouses, even at the best, as I mentioned earlier, things are going to happen. And regardless of how much you actually plan, sometimes the unexpected happens, and you have to be able to adapt to that, and you need to have a backup plan in place. For most of us, we're going to have some kind of additional funding. So you need to look at some places that you could get funding. I know most people go to the local bank, but sometimes your Farm Credit Association in the area can help. Sometimes the Small Business Administration can help, and there's a Small Business Development Center. I know there's one in Knoxville. They can sometimes help you locate the place that will give you the best loan. So you need to do a little bit of investigating, do a little bit of shopping around before you just walk into a local bank and take whatever offer they give you. Question 9, what criteria will you use to choose a location? Obviously, you have to decide where you're going to put your business. And so with zoning, you may be in a area that is looking good for a business, but you may be paying more taxes, or the land may cost more because it's a business zoned area. You may need to look for places that are agriculturally zoned. It may help you on the front end. However, that may hurt your sales, so you need to look at that carefully. You also need to look at utilities. If you don't have a water supply, then clearly you're going to need to be somewhere where there's a municipal water supply. If you plan to heat with gas, you need to be in an area that has gas available. And then there's a list of site considerations that we'll cover later. It's not in this chapter, but there is a list of things that you need to consider when you choose a location for a greenhouse, because some sites just are better suited to growing crops in a greenhouse. Question 10 states, when do you plan to start up? And most of us don't realize the amount of lead time we're going to need in order to start a greenhouse business. Your book suggests a 14 to 18 month startup phase before you actually open, and I think that's probably a good time frame to work in. If you think you're going to open a greenhouse business, you need to draw out a timeline of when you're going to get your loan, when you're going to get your greenhouse built, when you're going to plant your crops, because you are going to need a significant amount of lead time from the day you decide to open a greenhouse business until the day that you can actually open for business. When we come to Chapter 4, we'll talk more about the types of greenhouses, but you do need to spend some time on the front end and look at the different types of greenhouses to decide what kind of greenhouse you would buy. And again, we're going to look more at this in Chapter 4, so I won't spend a lot of time here. And of course, we always need workers. Question 12 says, what do I do about hiring and training workers? If you're in the greenhouse business and you have about 8,000 square feet of growing space, you probably are going to need some seasonal help. Not full-time, but seasonal. Whenever you expand to about 12,000 square feet, you're probably going to need more than one employee. So with 8,000 square feet, you might can hire one person during the growing season. When you expand to 12,000 square feet, you're probably going to need an additional employee. And if you ever grow to the point that you have 20,000 square feet of growing space, you're probably going to have at least one full-time employee to keep the business going, and you may need a few extra part-time employees. As far as training workers, they are going to have to go through the worker protection safety training, the video that you guys watched last week, and there are some additional requirements for that. Again, as we go throughout this semester, that's something that we'll be looking at in a little more detail. Question 13 asks, how do I go about marketing my product? And I can't emphasize this enough, but you want to grow what sells, not what you are fond of. So whenever you start to market your product, you need to make sure that you have a product that has been researched for your area. If you're growing mums and no one in your area likes mums, then you're just out of luck. So doing the upfront research really can help you in the long run whenever you start to market your product. Question 14, what kind of business records do I need to keep? If you are in the greenhouse business, keep all your records. Keep everything down that you sold. Keep everything down that you bought. Keep a list of your monthly electric bill, your monthly water bill, your monthly gas bill. Keep a record of the days that it's sunny, the days that it rains. You want as many records as you possibly can. As a matter of fact, having a record book and reporting in it daily is a really great idea. And finally, question 15 says, have you contacted these resources yet? There are some resources available to you, the small business associations, your local chamber of commerce, county extension agents, insurance companies, departments of ag, tons of places that you can go to get additional information. I know that's a brief overview, but if you will take time, read the entire chapter in depth. As you do that, complete the handout, and then when you finish, go ahead and complete that open book quiz. Have a great week.